Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you are all doing very well today. I am just sitting here in my room, and I wanted to address a few questions that I was very fortunate to receive from some viewers and who have become very dear friends of mine. So thank you very much. Before I get to the questions, I just want to show you very quickly what I've been watching, or what I've received just over the course of the last few days or so. As some of you know, I am reviewing or revisiting many of the films from 1960s and 1970s Japanese cinema. And among that rediscovery are the films of Nagisa Oshima. Now, some of you may know the name Nagisa Oshima. He has a number of very interesting films, for instance, in the Criterion Collection. He has there's a set in the Eclipse series called Oshima's Outlaw 60s. A very fascinating set. I highly recommend that you get that if you have the chance. A great Eclipse set. He also has the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and also the film Empire of Passion. He also has the film In the Realm of the Senses, which I think is one of those great, great films. I cannot wait to have the opportunity to talk about that film. I truly believe it to be it's truly remarkable and unbelievable in many respects. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. And it's quite it's a very memorable experience. It's one of those films that one I don't think will ever forget watching, but that can be a good meaning or a bad meaning depending on your point of view, of course. And I understand its controversy and the way in which it's controversial, but I think it's a truly magnificent work, and I cannot wait to talk about it one day. But in the meantime, my friends, I've been watching, or I've been revisiting a lot of his stuff, and among the films that I have that I've been going over are, well, there's his early films, of course, but I've just also been revisiting his later works. So I just got this in the mail one day ago, actually. And this is a Japanese Blu-ray of Max Mon Amour. A very interesting, quite peculiar work, if I do say so myself, but still very much worth seeking out if you are interested in the unexpected in a certain point of view, so to speak, from Oshima. And then his last work before he unfortunately passed away, Gohatto. This is a very, I would say, another ingenious work in a quite different way. That's one thing about Oshima's career which is very fascinating. He seems to have made many different types of films in the course of his very varied career. Incredibly interesting. You know, it's like one film is totally unlike the last film he made. It's really remarkable the kind of breadth of scope that he was able to achieve, and the sharpness and the wit and the intelligence that he was able to infuse in all of his works. But they're all different. And he had an animation film, he had this surreal, almost black comedy films, he's had these slightly erotic thriller noir films, he's had landscape films. If you know Japanese 60s, 70s cinema, you know the landscape, the phenomenon of the landscape film. He had a very important landscape film. Samurai films, and of course very highly charged, sexually charged erotic films, etc. Ghost stories, etc. Everything, absolutely everything. So his career is very rich and quite intense and unique. So one of these days I'd like to talk about Oshima's works, if I may, but who knows. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. And speaking of Japanese cinema, I do want to show this book that I was able to get some time back, but I've just been devouring it like crazy. It's called let's see, it's in English it can be referred to as Japanese anarchy movies 1959 to 2016, and it's basically just an overview or like a reference book of films, various films and little over snippets of about producers and filmmakers and directors during this time. And anarchy films, it's a very generally loosely applied term, I think, to mean films that have a certain cult edge to them, films that have certain subject matter that can be seen as being, let's say, not necessarily mainstream, but perhaps quite volatile, very thought-provoking, very provocative, maybe in terms of sexual content, in terms of politically charged content, in terms of the way in which mainstream ideals within the cinematic mainstream, so to speak, are basically shattered by these independent voices in cinema. They're not always from the far reaches of independent cinema, of course. Some of these films come from the studio system, which is a very interesting and fascinating story in and of itself. Shochiku, Nikkatsu, and all that. But again, we have a wide range of these really bizarre, wicked, just outstandingly effective, mind-blowing films. And it's just an amazing book. I'm very happy to have been able to get this. So I don't know, anyone who reads Japanese, I would highly recommend that you try to seek this one out. There is quite a comprehensive overview of many, many films. It's very difficult for me to catalog what's here, but one of these days perhaps I'll try to do so. So if you're friends with me on Facebook or something, or on Instagram, please let me know and I'll see what I can do. I can't make any promises, of course, because it does take a little bit of time, but there are some really fascinating films in here that are really worth talking about. A lot of them are not even available, I think, with English support. But anyway, Japanese anarchy films. Now, on to the questions that I received. I received a number of really exciting and quite interesting questions, and so I thought I'd take the opportunity to address them directly in this video format, if you don't mind. So, I received a question from our dear friend and wonderful film enthusiast, Stavrogin77. So Stavrogin77, my friend, it's always a pleasure to read your comments and to engage in great conversation with you. You are very intelligent, very smart man. It's a real pleasure to be able to meet you and to continue to talk with you. So thank you very much. So you asked a very interesting question about my viewing habits, and I think your question, if I may paraphrase, is, so Daisuke, do you have a system by which you watch movies? In other words, do you assign a particular night of the week to watch a certain film? You know, for instance, do you have a Criterion night? Is Wednesday your Criterion night, or is Friday your I don't know, Japanese film night or silent film night or something? Do you have some kind of system by which you watch certain films? And the answer to that is, I used to, but I don't anymore. I used to have a system where I would assign Friday nights to be a Laserdisc night. And so therefore I would just pick a random Laserdisc from my Laserdisc shelves and I just watch a film on Friday, and it would be a Laserdisc. And that was my system for a while. And that meant, of course, that for the other days it was just really random. So I would either watch a film on a particular night, or I wouldn't watch a film and I would basically maybe take the night off, so to speak, or just go to sleep early or something like that. So that was my system for a while. But now, I must admit, I have no particular system by which I watch movies. So it's really just more how I feel about a certain, watching a certain thing. I think I've been pretty fortunate in that I don't usually feel, how should I put it? If it's, sometimes I understand the feeling that one can have when one is approached with watching a new film for the first time. It can be a little bit daunting, and sometimes it might be a little bit hard to be motivated to do that. I've been pretty fortunate, I think, because I've never necessarily felt that daunting feeling when watching a new film for the first time. If it's even a long film or a 3-hour film that's maybe by a filmmaker that I'm not particularly familiar with or something like that, and the subject matter might be something that it might be difficult for me to engage with for the first time. It might be slow or something. I've usually been okay with that because I don't necessarily get into the film immediately, but it's always nice to watch different things. I'm always excited when I watch something new. Whether I ultimately like the film or not is a different question entirely, but usually I've been fortunate that I didn't have to worry about being bored immediately or something. It's not true for everything, but I think for the most part I've been pretty fortunate. So that means, therefore, that I don't necessarily need a system to stick to for a particular day of the week, but on the contrary, it's just a matter of whether I have the stamina or not, whether I am wide awake or not, or whether perhaps I didn't sleep that much the night before because I was up all night watching a movie, so the next day I maybe feel a little bit tired, and so I decide to go to sleep. So that's the primary factor for me now in watching films. So I'm not sure if it's the best way to watch films, because it sort of suggests a mode, a physical mode, and a mental mode wherein I have to think about my own physical limitations, and so that can tend to get in the way, so to speak, of what should be, at least in my eyes, the primary motivating factor, which is the work itself. So I'm always regretting that, and it's just unfortunate, but that's just the situation in which I find myself. So I am just trying to adapt as much as possible. So I don't usually have any set system, and what that means also is that I usually let my feelings and my intuitions, I usually let that guide me. So I usually watch films in phases. So when I watch something, like now I'm in the Japanese 60s, 70s phase, so I'm basically throwing myself headfirst into that pool, and I'm just immersing myself in all the stuff that I can find, and so it's very exciting. But what that means, of course, is that I'll probably tend to block out other films that I would otherwise be interested in. So, for instance, I'm not at all watching French films now because I'm just focusing on Japanese films. I'm not watching American comedies, for instance. So I'm more or less focusing on the Japanese films as far as my feelings are. And then when that subsides, I think I will graduate from that and then move on to something new, or something, maybe a rediscovery, or in terms of some films maybe I've seen before or not. So I'm actually thinking maybe after I'm done with Japanese cinema, I'm thinking, where am I going to go next? And so I was thinking, I really want to rewatch Out One again, but I haven't decided yet. But I'll leave that for a discussion for another day. But in the meantime, so that's my general approach, and I think, Stavrogan, I don't know how you feel about my answer, but I think now that I'm explaining it, I realize just how potentially narrow-minded my approach is, because I tend not to, how should I put it? I tend to decide, generally speaking, where I want to go, and then I'll let my discovery lead me to different places, if you know what I mean. So if I watch something by this filmmaker within this particular subgenre, then I'll try to watch other films within that subgenre and then go from there. Or if I'm reading a book or a treatise on something, then I'll try to watch all the films that are referenced in that particular article or book to the extent I'm able. And that sort of progress, which I think you are, and many others like you, I think are very familiar with in terms of how to discover and widen one's scope as one discovers more and more. You know, watching one film leads to something else, leads to something else, leads to something else, and that kind of progression. So I think, I don't know, on the one hand, I'd like to think that that's a good approach, but on the other hand, I can see how it might be considered by some to be a little bit close-minded, because it's still within a certain bubble or a certain degree of comfort. I'm still within my comfort zone, so to speak. So I'd like to think that I try to venture out of my comfort zone, but perhaps I don't do so as much as I should, in which case I think having a system like you suggested might be something very good. So for instance, maybe I should think of a system going forward, like maybe now every Friday night should be a film that I have never seen and have never heard of before, or from a particular region that I have no idea what the film history is about from that particular region, or I have very little information. So maybe I should set aside a day in the week, like a Friday, just for a purely new experience film. Let me put it that way. So, Starvergan77, thank you very much. I think in the process of answering your question, I think I have realized my own limitations and close-mindedness. And so now I think I will try to implement this idea of a system, and I will now designate Friday nights now as being the night I will try to watch something that I haven't seen before, something new, something fresh. And so thank you very much, Savergan. So I think in the midst of this conversation, you have once again inspired me. Well done, my friend. Thank you very much. Yes, so I hope that answers your question, Savergan. Again, I apologize for the zigzag nature of the way I answer this question, but I hope you can forgive me. Okay, my friend, and my other friends out there as well, thank you very much. And I will answer some more questions in upcoming videos. In the meantime, my friends, I hope you are all happy and healthy and well, and that you keep on watching a lot of great movies. And my dear friend Starvergan77, you have my thanks and my deepest appreciation for you and your time and your wonderful question. I can't wait to talk to you again, my friend. Okay, so until we meet again, cheers.